Welcome to the third and final part of my X-Men MCU pitch. This is a project I've been working on for quite some time that details how I would bring the mutants into the MCU if that was my job. Keep in mind this is all purely hypothetical and my own imagination, but I do like friendly discussion, so after you've watched the video, definitely head down to the comments and tell me what you think of this and what you would do the same or differently. I would love to hear it. As mentioned in the two previous videos, this entire plan is divided up into 3 acts, or 3 chapters, 3 parts, whatever you want to call it, but I went with the term acts, and each of those acts contains its own selection of titles, whether that be movies, TV shows, animated shows, special presentations, and they're all kind of bundled together in a way that sort of tell their own story, but all fuel the larger story at hand. Largely how the Infinity Saga was structured. In total, the entire plan is 24 projects that would be told across 10 to 12 years, which is the exact same length of time as the Infinity Saga and only one more project than the Infinity Saga had. And lastly, if you guys missed the first 2 parts, I will link them both in either the description or the pinned comment, so check down there to find them, and then watch those before you come back here to watch this, because this is the final part of it. As always, it's worth noting here that some of these ideas are more fleshed out than others. Sometimes I will have a full story treatment, sometimes it will just be a basic concept. So they all range from barely even thought out to very fully thought out. So keep that in mind that some things I will have more to talk about than others. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's hop into the third and final part of my MCU X-Men plan. Act 3 consists of 4 films, 1 animated series, 2 live-action series, and 1 special presentation. And it is the conclusion. Final moves are made, the stakes are increased, there will be consequences to this fight as everything comes to an end, and the world of the mutants will never be the same. But we get to start it off with something fun. Kicking it off, we have an animated series called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is an adaptation of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, but with the context of the MCU version of these heroes and their storylines. Basically, we drop Deadpool into a pocket universe and have him kill the MCU heroes who have probably gone insane. Maybe they've been possessed, whatever, but point is, Deadpool has a task to kill every single one of them. And the reason we're tossing him into a pocket universe is so that we don't have to be tethered to the greater MCU, and we won't destroy the entirety of the timeline by having Deadpool kill everyone. But I do still want this to be canon. I want the Deadpool that we know and love to be the one that does this. It's a pretty simple concept. It would be dark, it would have to be TVMA, and it would be animated, because I think this story would be 1, very expensive live action, and 2, very funny in an animated format. Back to the live action stuff, let's do our first film for Act 3. This film is titled X-Men New Age and is the 5th mainline X-Men film. Of course, there was the trilogy in Act 1, and there was Avengers vs. X-Men in Act 2, so this is the 5th mainline entry. In this story, we'll focus on the Sentinels now coming for the mutants. We've seen everything the mutants have done. They defeated the Avengers, and now the world is coming after them. The main villains of this movie would be, of course, Bolivar Trask, the man who created the Sentinels, and the Sentinels themselves. I want this film to start with some mutants in hiding being hunted by the Sentinels, but I want to focus on an actual character for this. I don't want it to be a bunch of no-names, so I want to kick this off with Nightcrawler actually in his mansion in hiding when the Sentinels come for him, and he is saved by the X-Men just before they can execute him. What is most crucial to this story is that we see characters die. We need to be able to see the consequences of the Sentinels. But we can't kill off any of the main players because I have plans for a lot of them as this saga finishes up. So we have to find some other characters that we can kill and still feel the emotions of killing. And I think we should kill off at least 3 characters. I don't think we need to go as crazy as Days of Future Past did and kill off literally everyone and drive the mutants to the point of extinction. I don't think we need to do that. We just need to have 3 impactful kills throughout the movie. So I think the early kill of the film, someone who dies in Act 1 just to show off how dangerous the Sentinels are, should be Cannonball. We made him a member of the X-Force in this continuity, but he's not a major player in this saga, so we can get away with killing him. He's a character we've seen before, so we will still have that attachment of seeing someone die, but it's not someone who would greatly affect where this story is going. And that way we can show off early just how legitimate of a threat the Sentinels are. They are not killing unnamed background mutants. They are killing characters we have spent time with. I want Mystique to die as well. She has been here since the very first X-Men film. I think it's okay to wrap up her storyline and let her character die. And I want her death to fuel Magneto's storyline, because I'm going to take him in some interesting places for the remainder of this saga. But I don't want her to get fridged. I want Mystique to die doing something important. And what I want that to be is her finding a weakness, or her finding the key to defeating the Sentinels, but she ends up dying in the process. Oh yeah, I mentioned Magneto. He's back. He is broken out of prison that he's been in since the very ending of Act 1, and he is going to be a major player in this film. Because Magneto has seen something like this coming for a while. This is what he has been trying to fight against, and he becomes instrumental in defeating the Sentinels and saving mutant kind. I want to take this film to tell somewhat of a Magneto redemption arc. In a way, I kind of want Magneto to be our main character in this movie, actually. But the mutants have to be non-trusting of Magneto. Even though he's working with the X-Men in this film, they are not allowed to trust him. By the end of the film, they are tolerant of him, but Xavier is the only one who actually properly sees the good in Magneto. And in typical Magneto fashion, by the end of this story, he goes out on his own into the world to just do more Magneto stuff.
Doesn't it ever wake you up in the middle of the night? The feeling that one day they'll come for you and your children. It does indeed.
I don't want him to be a villain anymore by the end of this film, but I don't want him to be a hero. I want him to just be in a weird gray area. But this brings us to the final emotional death of this film. The person who, at the very end, dies as the Sentinels are defeated, and his sacrifice is instrumental in defeating them. And I knew it had to be a main member of the X-Men. And when I sat down and I was writing this story out, I struggled for a while to kill off the character that I chose to kill off, but ultimately decided that the story needed it. Iceman. The reason I struggled with this so much is that when I was a kid reading some X-Men comics and mainly watching the X-Men films, Iceman was always one of my favorite characters, so I struggled to kill him off, but to me that just reaffirmed why he should die. I think we need a big, major emotional death so that we have consequences to the Sentinel fight, and Iceman has been a member of the X-Men team from the first movie. He was in the original lineup. So killing him would be huge and really shift the status quo of where the X-Men are from here on out. I want a final X-Men charge against Trask and the Sentinels, and I want throughout the movie Trask to kind of be working on one more Sentinel, and it's just basically the super powerful, insane, undefeatable Sentinel, and at the end it's kind of Infinity War style powering its way through all the X-Men and they're on the back foot, but at the end of it they end up winning. The Sentinels are defeated by the end of this movie. I don't want the Sentinels to go on too long. I want them to be a thing that happens that is very important to the X-Men that sticks with them. But they're defeated, Trask loses, and it opens the door for a much bigger threat. A post-credit scene between Jean and Xavier reveals that Charles has felt something through Cerebro, a mutant more powerful than any that have come before, with the power to destroy everything. Jean joins him and feels the same thing. One brief shot of the Great Pyramids of Giza and we cut. Fans know exactly what it is without seeing or hearing it. Apocalypse is coming. And with that, we can move on to our next thing, that being our special presentation for this act titled, All I Want for Christmas is Deadpool. This is it. This is one of the main reasons I decided to actually go ahead and make this video, because this idea is too good to not do. In fact, if someone from Marvel is watching this, you can use this idea and not pay me a single cent. I will not argue it in any way. I don't want to be paid. I just want to see this idea on screen. All I Want for Christmas is Deadpool is a live-action Disney Plus Christmas special in which Deadpool has to team up with a bunch of kids at the X Mansion to finish decorating and wrapping presents on Christmas Eve night. But this is all turned on its head when some people attempt to infiltrate the mansion, leading to Deadpool and the children having to set up a bunch of Home Alone-style traps to fend off the attackers. Much to the dismay of Deadpool, who just wants to pull out his guns and swords and kill everyone instantly, but is unfortunately trapped in a kid setting. The namesake of this special comes from the Mariah Carey song that we are all familiar with, All I Want for Christmas Is You, that Deadpool is going to mention numerous times in the holiday special that he hates. But when it ends up playing over the loudspeakers at some point during the fight, he loses his mind, pulls out his guns, and tries to start killing people, but it's all censored because of the setting he's in, which just makes him even angrier. The special ends with a cameo by a couple of the X-Men who finally wake up to come see what all the ruckus is, but it has somehow been magically cleaned up, and Deadpool looks rather suspicious. But none of them need to know why. And then, of course, we're going to end it with a cute little Christmas morning thing where they all open their presents and one of the kids got something for Deadpool, and it would be something funny. I don't know what the object is. I don't even know if we need to see the object. But we just need to see Deadpool's reaction to whatever his Christmas gift is. But that's All I Want for Christmas is Deadpool, and with that we can move on to our first live-action series of Act 3, simply titled Magneto. I wanted to give Magneto a limited series so that we can fully flesh out his redemption arc that began in the previous X-Men film. I think this should start off with Eric living on the island of Krakoa, which, much to the dismay of several people, is not actually going to be a living, breathing mutant in this. It's more just going to be a combination of aspects of both Krakoa and Genosha that forms a haven for mutants. And this is going to be a place that several mutants have relocated to, including Magneto, following the incident with the Sentinels. I want there to be several villains in this show that kind of help to represent what Magneto used to be and doesn't want to go back to being. One of which being the Shadow King, and I want the Shadow King to kind of preach in a similar manner to what Eric was always doing in his villain years. He brainwashes everyone on the island and tries to convince them that he needs to fight back and join with him, and that it's the right thing to do, and that he is preventing all the bad things that could come. And Eric is trying not to listen to this. And with that, then Magneto has to fight a bunch of people on this island and try his hardest not to kill them, but he's an Omega-level mutant who is used to being okay killing people, and now he basically has to try to be a pacifist. The other main villain is gonna be Mr. Sinister, and he and the Shadow King are both working for Apocalypse. We are fully stepping into Apocalypse territory. Enter one of our most important characters in the show, because I do not think this story can be told without Charles Xavier. Let's have him and Magneto have to team up for this show to solve this rather large problem that's happening, because this is the mutant of all mutants who is now getting involved. And what's important to wrap this whole thing up is the way in which the Shadow King and Mr. Sinister are defeated. Eric and Charles defeat them not as individuals, but as a duo, fully coming together after being on opposite sides of this fight for so long. To wrap up the story, Charles offers Eric a place at the X Mansion, trying to accept him back as a brother in a sense, but Magneto declines, saying that the people of Krakoa are his people, and it's his duty to look after them, fully renouncing the Magneto moniker, putting his helmet away, and just becoming a man of peace on this island with all of these other people. And for a bit of a deep cut, the people of Krakoa are going to call him Max, which is Eric's actual name in the comics. And that's the last we see of Magneto. He's out of the story. That's definitely the last that we are going to see of Magneto for the remainder of this saga. On to our second film of Act 3, we have a movie titled Wolverine Deathstrike. This film is the culmination of what we've seen from the Wolverine storyline previously through the X-23 movie and the Weapon X series, so we're actually going to culminate it by making Logan and Laura a team in this movie. We're going to team them up, they're going to be the co-leads on this adventure together, and we have to tie up some loose ends that we've left. Stryker is back. Sabretooth is back. And the film gets its title from the villain Lady Deathstrike, who is a very famous Wolverine villain and is going to be Stryker's ultimate creation. This movie is somewhat of a dark comedy, with Logan and Laura having a really funny banter, and Logan not really vibing with Laura for part of the movie. And as for Sabretooth, I actually don't want him to be a villain in this movie. I want him to be an anti-hero who's out on his own. He has his own goals and his own motives in the story. And most importantly, given the fact that our four main characters in this film all have knives for hands, this movie has to be rated R. We need to be able to see the brutality of this specific group of characters all throwing down with each other. The premise of this story is that Logan and Laura both want to just be able to settle down and get on with their lives, but their pasts will not let them do that. Stryker comes back onto the scene, wanting both Wolverines, refusing to let the monsters inside them die. So Wolverine falls in love with Deathstrike, not realizing initially that she is effectively an inside man, that is just supposed to get close to Wolverine, and this is what brings Wolverine back in the game. And Laura, who has been watching Wolverine a lot lately, decides to tag along with him despite his wishes. And Logan is tired. He has spent his entire life fighting. I know that kind of sounds like the first sentence of an Old Man Logan pitch, but we're not actually doing Old Man Logan. It's more of this internal crisis he has over the fact that he has spent his entire life trying to fight off what Stryker wants him so badly to be. He needs to be having nightmares and PTSD throughout this story. It is impossible for him to sleep. He is too broken and impacted by what he is being put through every minute of every day. The reason X-23 is with Logan is because they're inherently linked, Laura being his daughter. I don't need to explain it. You've all seen Logan, and it's because of Stryker that all of this has happened. He is that obsessed with the Wolverine. So this story really gives us the potential to touch on themes of obsession and addiction, and seeing that in certain characters, with Logan being unable to let the monster part of him go because Stryker's so addicted to it, he just keeps making new versions of Wolverine because he loves Wolverine that much. And then we get to see how those obsessions and those addictions can impact and harm you, which is ultimately what leads to Stryker's downfall. I also want to give Sabretooth a sort of redemption. He's part of this obsession that Stryker has. Logan, Laura, Sabretooth, and Deathstrike all have that same connection. Stryker wants to turn them into monsters and his own personal weapon. So I really want the third act of this to be Wolverine, X-23, and Sabretooth all working together. I think halfway through this movie, we need to put Sabretooth with the duo and turn them into a Wolverine trio. I want it to be a final attack against Stryker where they all have to work together to defeat Lady Deathstrike. The juxtaposition is that Deathstrike is the one who was unable to fight against what Stryker was doing and is his ultimate weapon. She is the monster that Stryker wants Wolverine to be. There's going to be a lot of stabbing, a lot of blood. She seems very unbeatable because she has no humanity behind those eyes. But this is an emotional story for Logan. This fight needs to come down to Logan and Deathstrike because this is, one, a romantic interest for him. Two, this is effectively him fighting his bad self. And three, him fighting his past because of the connection to Stryker. So let's have Deathstrike get Sabretooth and Laura out of the fight somehow. Get them out of the way and bring this down to a 1v1 between Logan and Deathstrike where she is effectively butchering him. She's not letting up with her attacks and he just cannot match the ferocity that she has. And finally, Logan tries to talk to her and snap her out of it, and it doesn't work. And right as she is about to go in for a killing blow on Logan, X-23 comes up behind her and cuts her head off. Much to the dismay of Logan, who gets very pissed and cannot be calmed down by X-23. But the person who can calm him down is Sabretooth. Finally, Stryker needs to go out in the most satisfying way possible. And I'm thinking it needs to be akin to the way the High Evolutionary was defeated in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Have all of them go up against him and just they keep getting licks in and he can do literally nothing about it and they tear him up, but the killing blow belongs to Logan. But Logan can't do it. Because he just realizes that if he were to kill Stryker, he is becoming the monster that Stryker so badly wants him to be. So Wolverine retracts his claws, refuses to do it, but Sabretooth does not refuse and lands the killing blow on Stryker. So this villain that has now been such a problem for all the Wolverines throughout this entire saga is finally gone. I think it would be awesome to set this final fight in Madripoor. Sabretooth became an important piece of Madripoor in the Weapon X series, and setting this final fight against Stryker in a place so inherently linked to the mutants is very important to me. And I think I'll end this story with all the Wolverines being together. Logan and Laura are going to stay in Madripoor. At least for a while. It's not the end of this story. They're not going to be permanently separated from the X-Men. But I think I want this chapter of their story to end with them staying in Madripoor. And the final shot of the movie is just Wolverine going to sleep. But there is a post-credit scene, because of course there has to be. Every movie has to have a post-credit scene. And it's akin to the post-credit scene at the ending of Thor Ragnarok, where the two brothers have come together and Thanos' ship appears. We're going to do something similar to that. We're going to end it with our Wolverines all in a room with X-23 doing something and Logan and Sabretooth talking, the two brothers talking, figuring out their next moves, when a threat arrives and we realize that Apocalypse has touched down in Madripoor. Apocalypse is here. And that leads us into our penultimate film for this saga. X-Men Rise of Apocalypse. The film that brings this all home. Apocalypse is here, and he's going to wreak some havoc. Apocalypse's goal in this film is going to be to destroy everything and start anew. Basically, redeem planet Earth for its mistakes. And while his target is humankind because he wants to make a haven for mutants and let them rule, any mutants who get in his way, he will not discriminate. The thing is that the first step of this plan requires him recruiting or eliminating anyone who is powerful enough to either stand with him or eliminate him. The Omega level mutants are his targets. So you know how Thanos was after the Infinity Stones? Apocalypse is after living people, and he has a checklist. I am going to have less Omega level mutants than there are in the comics, purely for simplicity's sake. So those are going to be Wolverine, Jean Grey, Magneto, Cable, and Professor X. So 5 mutants. And what would make this job infinitely easier and help him in spreading his message and ruling the world is Cerebro. You see how this is a problem? Something that is protected by a fair amount of those Omega level mutants. So now the X-Mansion is a target. And I don't actually want the opening to be in Madripoor. I want to come back to Madripoor, even though we teased it in the post-credit scene. I want the opening to be at Krakoa. I want Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen to first touch down in Krakoa. Known only as pestilence, famine, war, and death, the horsemen are brutal and merciless. An Apocalypse approaches this island with the horsemen and is met by Eric Lencher. And Apocalypse opens this up with a speech that goes as follows. Mutants, truly the most beautiful of all creations, yet put down and destroyed for those who would deem this world theirs. And so we shall rise anew and take that which was always meant to be ours. We are the future, and so today you can either join me or die. Magneto knows how this sounds and he knows it's wrong, so he makes the decision to stand against Apocalypse, which results in Apocalypse and the Horsemen destroying Krakoa. Basically, the entire landmass is on fire. Pretty much every mutant there Apocalypse has killed, everything is destroyed, and only a couple people, including Eric, managed to survive. But Magneto considers these deaths to be on his part because he's the one who decided to make the stand, and he stayed down after Apocalypse beat him. They didn't do so much as even scratch Apocalypse. It was a massacre. And this is the first 10 minutes of the movie. So Charles Xavier and Jean Grey are basically gonna be our main leads in the movie. They're kind of the ones we're following for a majority of it because they're the ones who are able to feel Apocalypse's return and the mass death that he is bringing with him. And all Charles and Jean know is that no one is ready for the fight that lies before them, but they have to try to fight. Remember how Infinity War had the heroes playing catch-up the entire movie and they were just trying to get ahead of Thanos? I kind of want to do that with this one. I want the X-Men to kind of have to go on rescue duty just to try to keep up with Apocalypse and save as many people as they can, including but not limited to the X-Men going on a mission to Madripoor. The X-Men team at the start of this consists of Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, Beast, Gambit, and Colossus. As for the other members, those being Rogue, Kitty Pryde, Jubilee, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and Nightcrawler, they stay at the X-Mansion. The X-Force have their own little side quest in the movie. They actually go to Egypt to learn about Apocalypse and find out how to defeat him, and while they're there, they meet a couple of mutants, one of which being Caliban, the mutant who can track other mutants. The X-Force is only going to consist of 3 members, actually, because we killed Cannonball, and Deadpool is not actually going to be in this movie. So the team is going to consist of Cable, Psylocke, and Major X. And the fight in Madripoor does not go well for the X-Men. Much of the city burns and Apocalypse kills Sabretooth right in front of his brother, then sets his sights on Jean Grey, who is almost defeated, but is saved by Magneto, who manages to get everyone out of there and hold Apocalypse off just long enough to save the X-Men. But he notices the Horsemen aren't there. Apocalypse separated from the Horsemen because Apocalypse has set his sights on the X-Mansion, while the Horsemen are in Egypt going after X-Force and Caliban. So Magneto and the X-Men all return to the mansion to prepare it for war, while the Horsemen all go after the X-Force, determined to kill, well, really all of them because they're all fighting, but Cable is their target, and they also try to go after Caliban because they can use him to find other mutants. They get Caliban, but one of the other mutants that the X-Force met was Blink. You guys all remember Blink from Days of Future Past. She's the one who can make portals. She manages to get them out of there just in time, but again, they lose Caliban. So everyone kind of regroups at the X-Mansion. Well, everyone except Deadpool, because again, Deadpool's not in this one. So they go prepare the X-Mansion for war. All the kids who either cannot or will not fight, they evacuate out of the mansion. They bring Xavier, Magneto, Cable, Jean Grey, and Wolverine down under the school so that they can use the school basically as a fortress, and all of the non-Omega level mutants, the rest of the X-Men, are the one that stand guard. So Cyclops, Storm, Gambit, X-23, Psylocke, Major X, Beast, Nightcrawler, and Colossus all have to guard the school waiting for Apocalypse to arrive. But he never does. But the Four Horsemen show up with all the mutants who have also decided to fight with Apocalypse, and they get the X-Men on the back foot, and the X-Men have to retreat deeper into the base. But they're cornered, so they have to start figuring out how they're going to save everyone, and you really get the feeling that they're not going to win this fight. So Blink starts evacuating all the Omega-level mutants to Madripoor, which Magneto volunteers, and Xavier doesn't like this plan, but they have to save the Omega-level mutants at this point, because that's the best chance the world has. And then after that's done, they blow the mansion, letting it crumble down and destroying Cerebro in the process. Beast, we do end up losing in this fight. He decides to 4v1 the Horsemen and hold them inside the mansion as it buries all of them. So we do lose the Horsemen, thankfully, but we lose Beast as well, meaning that there are only 2 members left of our original X-Men team, those being Jean and Cyclops. But Blink doesn't make it out of this fight either, leaving all of the X-Men who were not on Krakoa stranded in Westchester. They won that fight, but at what cost? Enter Apocalypse, not in Westchester, but on Krakoa. He waited for this. This was the task the Horsemen got. Isolate the Omega-level mutants. And the team is now separated, and everyone Apocalypse is after is in the same place. And Apocalypse fights every single one of them at once. He rips Cable's arm off and almost kills him. He would kill Wolverine were Wolverine not immortal. Magneto holds strong, but he's ultimately defeated as well, with his helmet being destroyed and him getting impaled. That leaves Jean and Xavier, the 2 most powerful. Jean is the one who can almost defeat Apocalypse due to the Phoenix Force, but not even she can do it, as Apocalypse finally reaches Charles Xavier, and through their little mental battle, Charles Xavier is defeated and killed by Apocalypse in the final minutes of the movie. Apocalypse manages to get out of there before Jean's wrath can atomize him after what happened to Xavier, and he retreats back to Madripoor, heals, and chooses to destroy the entire city, now having defeated Charles Xavier. And the world watches as Apocalypse destroys all of Madripoor, just reducing it to rubble. The world is next. The X-Men were defeated. They are scattered across the world. Charles Xavier is dead. And Apocalypse has risen. And that is the end of Rise of Apocalypse. We're ending it on a dirty cliffhanger. Now, to get really dirty, the next thing we're doing is not actually a sequel to Rise of Apocalypse. Instead, we're going to be doing our final live-action series of the saga, The New Mutants. So we're going to give a little gap between the 2 films and instead tell a story about the New Mutants that takes place just a couple weeks after the ending of Rise of Apocalypse. And we're not going to be doing a typical New Mutants origin. Instead, I want to start the show with each member of the team as just a mutant that is in Madripoor trying to survive. And they're being hunted by Apocalypse loyalists. Because of course there would be Apocalypse loyalists. A lot of mutants have joined with Apocalypse. The main characters of this are Magic, Wolfsbane, Mirage, Warlock, and Magma. We can't use Cannonball for 2 reasons. 1, we made him a member of the X-Force, and 2, we killed him. And the villains of this show are going to be plenty, so get ready for this. I want the main villains of this show to be Selene, Animator, Emma Frost, Magus, and Limbo. And the idea here is they all kind of have connections to the heroes. Selene has a relation to Magma. Animator is a dude who likes to experiment on half-man, half-animal creatures. Wolfsbane. Emma Frost is the chick in X-Men First Class. Magus is gonna be the father of Warlock, and Limbo is that weird dimension thing that magic has access to. I want stuff to spill out of it and into the real world. I want Emma Frost, Animator, Magus, and Selene to become new Horsemen, and then we can really make this feel like it's the second installment of an Apocalypse trilogy. So if you have not noticed, the villains each have a New Mutant counterpart. Animator going to Wolfsbane, Selene going to Magma, Magus going to Warlock, Emma Frost has similar powers to Mirage, and Limbo, of course, going to Magic. The New Mutants all come together in their fight against their villains, helping each other fight their own personal hells. This is also a great way to do some world building. We are setting this entire series in Madripoor. We get to see what it looks like now. People trying to survive. Constant war. Yes, that is what we're doing. We are doing a post-apocalyptic setting. Limbo is the only thing defeated at the end of this, and Apocalypse has new horsemen. We're gonna bring Apocalypse into this show for a brief cameo. So while the New Mutants obviously do not win, this does lead us directly into the film that wraps up this entire saga. It all ends with one final movie titled X-Men Age of Apocalypse. Yeah, that's right. They couldn't put the age in front of it the first time because it would have been too similar to Age of Extinction and Age of Ultron. But now we are restoring the comic book's proper title and calling it Age of Apocalypse. The final chapter of the MCU X-Men storyline. The X-Men, X-Force, the New Mutants, Deadpool, and humanity all come together to defeat Apocalypse. And I can confidently say that this is probably the thing on this list I have the least figured out story-wise. I have the ending figured out, I have certain plot points figured out, I have who dies figured out, but this was the hardest one to pin down. Endings are really hard to do. I actually want to open this film on a darker note. I don't want to start it with the mutants. I want to start it on the humans, actually, as the US government begins throwing remaining Sentinels at Apocalypse, trying to use whatever resources they have to defeat him because nothing is working. As for the X-Men, they were beaten badly and have to regroup. Also, Deadpool joins the fray this time around. And Apocalypse has an army this time around. It's not just him and his horsemen. Mutants have joined the cause and they're starting to cause problems around the world. But they're all based in Madripoor. And that's where he waits and he watches as the world begins to tear itself apart. There is no hope. But the third act of this movie, and you guys are gonna probably need some explaining to understand what I'm cooking here. The third act of this movie is going to be Transformers Dark of the Moon with mutants. The final act of revenge and the final charge towards Apocalypse, but not before we lose Cable. We're gonna have Cable die to stop one of the Horsemen because I want to make the Horsemen sort of the obstacles in the third act that they just keep running into and they have to beat to progress. But luckily for us, we have teams in this, and we're gonna break them off and go on some little side quests with them. The New Mutants take down Animator, the X-Force goes after Selene, the main X-Men team themselves go after Emma Frost, and the two Wolverines get to deal with Magus. The last 30-40 minutes of this movie would be all-out carnage as everyone is fighting all the time. Humanity's help in this movie is that they are, again, using the Sentinels to go after Apocalypse, but because the Sentinels and the X-Men are going after the same guy, the Sentinels are reprogrammed to exclusively go after Apocalypse's army. The X-Men are all let off the hook. And in a shot we never thought we would see, Magneto leads our heroes alongside the Sentinels. Yes, you heard me. The final aspect of Magneto's redemption arc is going to occur right here, when he becomes team leader. He picks up from Charles. The X-Men are his now, and everyone rallies behind him. Humans and mutants alike, with their former biggest enemy leading them all, which then inspires a lot of Apocalypse's minions to go against him when they see that Magneto, of all people, is the one going against Apocalypse. I want Magneto to feel like an inspiration to mutants. The mutants who previously believed in Magneto, that are now with Apocalypse, see Magneto with the X-Men and decide to put their faith back in Magneto. This is the ultimate battle for Earth. Everyone is united against this one guy. And I want that final charge through Madripoor to feel like a massive unity that we've never seen before. But the fight against Apocalypse is going to be small. I want the team that initially fights Apocalypse to be Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and Wolverine. We're going to do a little homage to the original X-Men film. And once those 4 mutants fail to defeat him, enter everyone else. Magneto, Nightcrawler, Gambit, Deadpool, Jubilee, Kitty Pryde, X-23, Colossus, they start to beat him. But right as it seems like their victory is secured, he lands a fatal blow on Scott Summers. Cyclops is down. Jean Grey, now fully enraged because of this, unleashes the full Phoenix Force and powers up to take down Apocalypse. And everyone pitches in to help. Jean's not going to do this by herself. Everyone's going to pitch in, but that final blow ends with Jean beaming up with Apocalypse, seemingly being destroyed by the Phoenix Force in the process. But I don't want to say that Jean is dead or not. Her story was done. My story for that character is done. Any future X-Men stuff that happens after, it is up to the filmmaker of that to decide the fate of Jean Grey. I want to leave it ambiguous. But that's it. Apocalypse is dead. The world is saved, but at a cost. They lost many. Scott Summers gets the Tony Stark funeral treatment because he died after the fight was over. They got to say their goodbyes and give a send-off to the main character of this entire saga. This saga started with Cyclops and Jean Grey, and we lose them both to take down Apocalypse. Xavier, Beast, Sabretooth, Cable, Cyclops, and Jean all died in this fight. It was not without its consequences. And in typical X-Men movie fashion, we begin to rebuild the mansion and start anew. There is a funeral for everyone who died as well, giving them a full ceremony in typical MCU saga finisher fashion. And now that the threat with Apocalypse is over, the X-Men need a new team, because this is not the last threat they will ever face. A lot of the mutants go their separate ways. At the end of this, Major X goes off on his own. Wolverine wants to go off on his own, but Deadpool comes with him because Deadpool wants to be with Wolverine, and we get a shot of them walking off into the distance together for some undisclosed adventures that they're going to go on at some point in the future. Kitty Pryde becomes a teacher at the X-Mansion, and characters like Psylocke and Negasonic just say they want to take a break and relax for a while. Characters go their separate ways at the end of stories. We're not keeping them all together. As for the X-Men, the team now consists of X-23, Storm, Gambit, Colossus, Jubilee, Rogue, and Nightcrawler. And they are led by Magneto. And in one final sequence, I kind of want to montage what's going on. I want to have activity at the X-Mansion. I want to see the thing rebuilt anew. I want to see life and fun and a sense of home and family returned to the mansion as all of our new X-Men walk through it and we see Magneto as the head of the place. And maybe even have him swap out the flowers at Xavier's grave, because that would be a cute moment. And then the X-Men begin to get ready for wherever they are going. They all suit up. We're going to have a full suit-up sequence as they all walk through the base, meeting up with each other and into the hangar. And as the jet takes off, students and staff alike watch it fly away. and we get one final shot of the X-Jet with the new X-Men fly towards camera, and we linger on the X-Mansion. And that's the end. Is that the end of the X-Men in the MCU? Probably not. Should it be? Probably. That's up to you to decide. But that's what my X-Men story would be. A 24-part story that details the X-Men in the MCU. And even though I know Marvel won't release it this way, it still in a way feels that by making this video, I got to bring my story to life just by telling you guys. And that's what I wanted to do ultimately. So no matter what the MCU X-Men end up looking like, I will always have this to go back to. There you guys go. That is my MCU X-Men plan. I would love to know your thoughts on it, as well as some of the changes you would make. Maybe if you have your own plan or your own ideas, let me know, but let's get a little lively discussion going. I would love to hear from you guys. I spent so long working on this, and I'm very proud that I finally got to tell it. So leave a like on this so that I know you enjoyed this part of the video, and I hope you guys left likes on part 1 and 2 as well. I will also be compiling all of these into one thing and releasing it on its own later, so you guys can just watch it in one go instead of having to click on 3 videos, should you choose to watch this again. And if you're watching it in that compiled one, then I guess this portion isn't really necessary, but I feel like saying it anyway. So I will see you guys in whatever video comes next. But until then, have a good one.